Today I'm in Midsomer Norton, which is the community I live in, and we're doing a special Dom's Diary the day after we and the rest of the country, and indeed the world, have learnt of the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. And I wanted to film from the heart of the community because for me, and you can see the tributes are beginning to arrive here at the Hollies in the middle of Midsomer Norton. And this kind of activity, you can see some of the shops we've been walking past have their tributes, and this will be mirrored all around the country in communities up and down the land. And I wanted to come to the heart of the community that I'm part of and the radio station that I ran for many years, Summer Valley FM, which is all about empowering the communities, because for me one of the very strong points of the reign of Elizabeth II, and amidst all the tributes, I'm really keen to emphasise her affection, encouragement and support of community activity all around the country and throughout the 70 years of her reign. I was lucky enough to benefit from that, and I got this invitation back in 2019 as a request to join Her Majesty for lunch. It says, in the presence of Her Majesty. This is down at King's School in Bruton, and the Queen had, through the Lord Lieutenant's office, had asked to meet 100 people who had had an influence on community life in the Somerset area. And rather amazingly, to my surprise, my name came up. So it was a real pleasure to go along to join the Queen for an excellent lunch, by the way, prepared by the students of that school in Bruton. It emphasises to me that she was always thinking about community and understood the kind of cohesive force and the strengths and the backbone of what lies behind the stability of the nation that can be achieved through supporting community life. So now let's take a wander around and pick up on some of the reflections before I go into the radio station and present a special show. I'm at the town hall in Midsomer Norton. Busy old morning here, there's big traffic lights and a bus just pulling away there. But I wanted to come here because there is a royal association with this building. In around about 1911, the then King George V came here with the Queen Mary, and they visited coal mines in this area. And I think they also came back in the First World War. And I believe, and I'm slightly kind of tenuous on my knowledge here, so just bear with me, but I think they went to the village of Poulton, which is just over there, and I think they gave somebody a Victoria Cross, which is the highest award someone serving in the military can be given. And it's one of the few times where I think a VC might have been given, obviously not including the posthumous ones, but might have been given out in the field, as it were, as opposed to in the palace type environment. Anyway, up on this balcony here, the throng gathered below. The King and Queen made their appearance on the balcony and received a great deal of applause by the people of Midsomer Norton. I've got a little bit more to say about George V, but let's go to a rather special place. It's just over there, and again, more royal associations to think about. This is St John's, the parish church in Midsomer Norton, very central to community life. I always come up here on Remembrance Day in November when we meet at the town war memorial, and everybody comes up here for a service of commemoration. So rather appropriate venue to be talking today as we mark the passing of Queen Elizabeth II. But there is a royal connection here at this church that I wanted to draw your attention to today. That is that way up to my right on the tower is an effigy, a rather weather-worn effigy, I have to say, to King Charles II. And of course now we have a King Charles III. And the connection here is that the merry monarch, for that was he, came to Midsomer Norton. I like to think made a little bit of merry one evening, and the following morning woke up, and for whatever reason he didn't like the peal of the bells, so he had a new set of bells smelted, and they are the bells that ring out on Sunday morning to this day. So with thoughts of Charles II and to the new reign of Charles III, it occurs to me that one of the really important things about the merry monarch who reigned in the 17th century was that he was invited to be king after a period of republic. And that was an invitation by the people, effectively. And that establishes for the first time that monarchy is by consent of the people. Previous to that, it was thought that God ordained who would be the king or the queen. Thereafter, it was really, God may have had some part to do with it. I couldn't possibly judge on that, but it was really by the consent of the people. And it occurs to me that one of the points of emphasis in the 70-year reign of Queen Elizabeth II was that that became even more the case. So if there was a rather more reverential approach to monarchy and the settled order of things back in the early 1950s, I think we can now safely say that we have a monarch by consent of the population, and that is right at the start of the reign of Charles III. But one little point, I remember a press release, could be 25 years ago, at least 20 years ago, from St James's Palace, which said that when Charles eventually becomes king, he may take the name of George VII. There were 6 Georges to date, including the late Queen's father, George VI. And the reason given for this possibility, which hasn't actually happened, is because they said the name Charles is associated with decapitation. Of course, Charles II's father, Charles I, lost his head, beheaded by the state for causing the Civil War. Well, now with my knowledge of and funness of history, I did think of writing, in fact I think I did write, to say, well, that was all well and fine, but is the name George always one of happy associations? George II passing away as he did on the lavatory. George IV had a number of physical and mental health challenges, and wasn't always the kindest of people. But I think the name George, really for the modern royal family, comes from, in terms of positive associations, both George V and George VI. In fact, the modern royal family, I would say, entirely comes and was created by George V. Edward VII, his father, had a number of associations, a lot of which was associated with a good time, not necessarily and always with being the correctest of monarchs. He had quite a good time, frankly. I think he was all right, and I think he was always on the side of the people. In fact, I think that's what is interesting about monarchy in the UK, is it frequently is on the side of people, and perhaps the monarchy has given this country a stability that is absent from other comparable European powers that went down the route of republic and have had many blood revolutions in that period of time, since this country had one in the 17th century. But George V was perhaps not a person to excite the annals of history with the vivaciousness of his approach and the rich range of his personality, which I would think is more to do with his father, good King Teddy. But dull monarchs in a constitutional context make good kings or good queens. And there was nothing dull about the late Queen, but George V was always in his diary. I'm not quite sure why he kept a diary. I think that maybe just, I bet the Queen has, and it would be interesting to see about that in the future. But George V's diary was sort of marked by its sort of mundane approach. So, you know, it would be things like, well, today the weather was reasonably clement for the time of year, and I took a turn in the Buckingham Palace gardens and came back and looked at my stamp collection, and at some point we declared war on Germany. It was that kind of flavour, and actually the King, George V, was personally responsible for appointing the first Labour government in 1924 as a non-majority government, and it was his decision to send for Ramsay MacDonald and appoint him as the first Labour Prime Minister. And he says in his diary, what would Grandmama, referring to Queen Victoria, what would Grandmama think? And that just shows you how far the world had moved via the First World War since the passing of Queen Victoria in 1901, and when he was writing that in 1924. So the monarchy now, I think, largely thanks to George V, George VI, Elizabeth II, is relatively stable. It's not to say that Charles III doesn't have many, many challenges, but on this day, and it's still 24 hours, less than 24 hours since the passing of the Queen, those are debates and thoughts for another time.
Just gone 33 minutes past 11, and like I say, we have Dom here. Good morning, Dom.
Morning, Nigel.
Oh, what a shock, wasn't it?
Yes, I mean, it's still less than 24 hours since the palace announced the news of the passing of the Queen. It was sort of looking like going in that direction. I
think once the family started, but then I was like relating it to a couple of days earlier when Liz Truss went up there, and she looked so well, didn't she? She looked elderly, obviously, but she didn't look too bad at all. So deteriorated, obviously, very quickly.
From what we know about Her Majesty the Queen, the idea of going out, if that's the right way of putting it, having appointed her 15th Prime Minister, it's clearly a huge priority for her to undertake that duty as the head of state. And as I think she would like to point out in conversation, her first Prime Minister stood before her, head bowing, in a frock coat, the great Winston Churchill. And so it was very, very important to her to welcome in that protocol Liz Truss. Clearly she wasn't able to come down to London to fulfil that task. The Prime Minister went up there, and it felt like, looking back on it, that was, literally her last stand.
I think even when you're kind of expecting it, it's still a shock though, isn't it, when it happens?
Absolutely, and there's so many reflections because everybody's got a personal stake in this. Every citizen, everybody part of this country, and indeed other countries right across the globe, has a stake in the reign of Elizabeth II, and many people, some of us are getting on now a little bit, but we don't remember anything else, do we?
I was saying to Joe, most of us only know her as being the head of the monarchy, really. It's always been the Queen. I'm too young, even at 62, to remember anybody before then. It was 1952, I think, she took the throne.
That's right. In fact, I'm the age of the passing of her father, George VI, whose life was taken early, and the Queen Mother, Queen Elizabeth II's mother, Queen Elizabeth, of course, in her own time, really blamed, I think, the strain of the war and also, becoming king in unexpected circumstances. It wasn't brought up to do it. And so that led to kind of huge stress levels, which was possibly responsible for the bringing to his life early, which was in turn a surprise to his daughter.
She said at the time she will devote her life to the throne, which she did, didn't she? And just kept the stability, and there were ups and there were downs, but she was just that focal point. It's just everybody felt as if we had that focal point at the top of the charts, really, the Queen.
Yeah. And for me, one of the really important aspects of her characteristics and how she went about her duty was this extraordinary warmth and encouragement and support she instinctively had for all manner of positive
I think
community
everybody
activity.
said that who actually met her. They said how welcoming she was, and out of pure interest when she spoke to them as well. She was genuinely interested, wasn't she, in hearing what they had to say.
She was very much a people person, and so in my programme coming up after yours, Nigel, we will be dwelling on her supportive community activity, of which some of Funny FM's a fine example. It's empowering voices of the community now in its is it 14 or 15? I should know. I started it, but anyway, so we've been doing this for a while, and I think a good hook to to put the show.
Yes.
I don't really want to repeat what has been put so eloquently by world leaders. I want to find that kind of community angle and a rather special story which we'll save to the show when I was lucky enough to have lunch with the Queen.
Do you know, my next question was, I was going to say, did you ever see her? I wasn't going to say, have you ever met her?
Well, strictly speaking, I didn't meet her,
Right.
but I was invited to lunch, and
Wow.
and I'll have the details of all that. It was actually in her last visit to Somerset.
Gosh.
So
that'll be interesting.
a good story there. And today I've been out and about in Midsomer Norton filming and talking to people this morning. So a special video coming soon. And the tributes are gathering in the hollies right here in the middle of the town as we speak.
Yeah, it's going to take time to get used to this, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, okay. We will look forward to your programme 2 minutes past 12. Here's the Bangles and Internal Flame.
Just picture that, can't you? I don't need to picture it. I was there. Coldplay belting that one out across the hallowed turf of Somerset. There was a hit for them several years ago now, and it goes by the name of Talk. Thematically, I think rather spot on for where we are with this programme special, which is reflecting the passing of Her Majesty Elizabeth II, the news of which is still quite fresh to us. And the entire nation, and indeed all those parts of the world and all those countries and communities, her extraordinary reign and extraordinary life touched upon. So in this programme special here on Summer Valley FM, good afternoon, by the way, I'm Dom Chambers, and it's great to be here after a morning of talking to people and walking through the town of Midsomer Norton, where Summer Valley FM broadcasts from, and getting people's reflections and their thoughts, and seeing the marks of respect in the shops. And so today I'd like to focus really on the Somerset angle, really, how the Queen's reign and monarchy in general. I've got some anecdotes and thoughts about the relationship between this part of the world and the monarchy. I also got a special story of reflection from the moment I was lucky enough to be invited to have lunch with the Queen as part of a celebration of community life here in Somerset. So hopefully you'll enjoy the music selections as well, and generally hitting that tone of respect. This one from 1983 now. If you're around in those days, this will jog some memories. Mike Oldfield, Moonlight Shadow. Travelling Wilburys, Handle Me With Care, and that is our sign-off song on this particular lunchtime special show, marking the extraordinary life and reign of Queen Elizabeth II. Hopefully you've enjoyed the music choices. Momentous times for us all here in the UK. Do stay tuned to your local radio station as more news comes out. We're expecting the first announcement from King Charles III coming very soon, and then there'll be the whole plannings for the funeral. Keep tuned to us for all your updates in the meantime. That is just about it. Stay tuned to Summer Valley FM, and at 3 o'clock this afternoon, Seb will be here with Drive Time.
97.5 Summer Valley FM.
Right, well, that's about it from me and Dom's Diary this week. If you want to listen to the programme special there, that is available on summervalleyfm.co.uk website. More Dom's Diaries to come, but for the moment, at this time of reflection and actually celebration of the life of Queen Elizabeth II, that is it for the moment. And I'll see you back here for more Dom's Diary, probably without the garb, next time.